way and to be ready for week 1. Taylor today asked about his comments yesterday.
I said that yesterday? I think every day is a new day. We'll keep working through it. Not going to make predictions on what tomorrow brings. At the end of the day, Jamar's a great dude. That means a lot to this team, and we'll just continue to take it day to day.
When does this become a distraction?
It's not. I mean, it's a one-off situation that you got to deal with, and again, we'll just continue to take it day to day.
You still expect him to play in the over?
This is all part of that plan that we've talked about, so this is just the later stages of that plan. But I think it's wise for me just to say we're going to take it day to day and see what tomorrow brings.
Senior NFL insider Adam Schefter joining us now. Schefter, what's going on? What's going on here?
That's a different tone than yesterday. Yesterday, he said he expected him to play week 1.
Yeah.
And I don't think that played well with Ja'Marr Chase and his representatives. Now, Ja'Marr Chase has been very quiet during this time, so we don't know exactly what Ja'Marr Chase feels. But his actions spoke volumes today by the fact that he didn't participate in practice one day after Zach Taylor said he would be practicing, but he wasn't. My understanding is that these contract talks have been moving in slow motion, that there has not been a lot of progress, and that's reflected in the fact that Ja'Marr Chase was not out there, and that tells you that there is an issue here. And so Zach Taylor doesn't want to make any more predictions about what he thinks. He doesn't want to speak for the wide receiver because he knows the sensitivities involved when there's a negotiation like this, when both sides still are hoping to see if there's a way to get a deal done.
Yeah, when you joined us on Monday, I thought, man, he hedged a little bit, right? And showed his cards a little bit by coming back to practice. Certainly we'll see the Bengals open up the season at home against the Patriots September 8th. There's a couple of other big players, too, that are also waiting on new contracts. I'm talking about 49ers receiver Brandon Aiyuk and their tackle Trent Williams. GM John Lynch speaking today, just moments ago, in fact, about those negotiations. It's new on
the Trent situation.
No, there's no updates there. I mean, there's good communication. We're constantly working, throwing out ideas to try to have a breakthrough, and it just hasn't happened yet.
Is there good communication between you and Brandon?
Yeah, there's communication, and it's been ongoing. With Brandon, with his representative, and on that one as well. We just haven't been able to break through.
I love how you corrected the good communication with just communication. Let's go there. Let's make it all receiver. What are you hearing about Brandon Aiyuk?
Well, they said, the 49ers did, that they expect Brandon Aiyuk to practice today. He has not practiced all summer. He's been a hold-in. And someone said, well, what if he doesn't practice? And John Lynch said at that point in time, then we'll deal with it. Those were his words. But I think they are at a point here where it's a critical juncture. The Monday night regular season opener on Monday Night Football against the Jets is now 12 days away. Brandon Aiyuk hasn't practiced yet. They're expecting him to practice today. So this is going to be interesting to monitor for later. Because if he doesn't practice, that tells you that he is obviously standing up. He's calling their bluff, and we'll see where this situation goes. I don't know that there's been a situation like this that we've ever seen in the NFL that has dragged on, where there have been so many points where it seemed like a resolution was near, either him being traded to Cleveland, him being traded to New England, him being traded to Pittsburgh, him re-signing in San Francisco, him almost being traded, him almost re-signing in San Francisco, and still this situation being stuck in neutral without a solution in sight at this moment.
Him holding in, him holding out. We'll see. As you mentioned, the Niners open up the season at home against the Jets September 9th. Certainly would love to see both teams at their full complement. Adam Schefter with the latest around the NFL. Kevin?
I don't know if happy is the word. I think this is what was going to happen all along if you sort of listen to the Steelers beat reporters going back to the spring when they signed Russ. And basically what Mike Tomlin said, even before Justin Fields, they made that trade for him later in the spring. So this was going to be their guy. I think they got sidetracked a little bit, Haley, when Russ hurt his calf early on in training camp, so he didn't take part in the early preseason games. We saw a lot of Justin Fields. Justin Fields was okay. He wasn't great. Some of the same things we saw in Chicago and why he's no longer there. But I think this quarterback room is a lot better than it was 12 months ago, even though we heard our buddy Pete Prisco say earlier in HQ that he thinks this is the last place team in the AFC North. We'll find out together in terms of that. But I think the offensive line's going to be better, even if it's a bit younger. And Russ gives him a little more stability. And to Pete's point, he didn't play great the last 2 years in Denver. So he's going to have to turn things around. I think Arthur Smith, the new OC, helps with that because there's going to be a huge balance or better balance, I should say, in terms of running the ball and throwing the ball. And we know Arthur Smith likes likes to lean on the run game, and that's where Najee Harris comes in.
Definitely, and they will, of course, face Arthur Smith's former team in the Falcons in that Week 1 matchup. So we have one quarterback competition done. There's still one spot, though, up for grabs in New England. Drake May really made this quarterback conversation a little bit more interesting for his head coach, Jerod Mayo. And Jerod was actually asked about that today, just how he approaches telling the players and what it looks like to name a starting quarterback. Let's listen into that sound real quick.
When you tell the team who's going to be the starting quarterback, do you have to explain it to them, do you think, or do you just make that announcement and that's it and it is what it is?
Look, they've gone through the process as well. They've gone through the spring with these players. They've gone through training camp with these players. I'm sure they all have an opinion on who they think should be the starting quarterback, but I don't think I have to explain it to anyone else. It's my decision, and look, if it doesn't work, blame me. Blame me.
Coach, what can you tell us?
I would say one thing. I think it's important to remember, like, what's good for the team today may not be good for the team weeks down the line. And so I think the challenge is you want to win every single game now, but also we're trying to build something special here in New England. So that to me was, that was a challenge.
Okay, Ryan, so obviously a decision needs to be made. It sounds like it's a challenging decision for Jerod Mayo here. I'm curious your thoughts after hearing that and what direction he should go in with that quarterback competition.
Haley, I wonder how this rates on our colleague Tom Fornelli's whoopsie-daisy scale in terms of what we're hearing from Jerod Mayo, because it felt like for the longest time that this was Jacoby Brissett's job. Drake May is only 21 years old. He's done extremely well, exceeded probably most people's expectations during the preseason. He's looked really good. The issue is the same issue it's been for weeks and months. The offensive line is in disarray, especially the tackle position. And if you don't have offensive tackles that can protect your quarterback, it doesn't matter who it is, he's going to take a beating. And my buddy Rick Spiel and I have talked about this with the first pick for a few weeks now. It feels like a situation where Jacoby Brissett should start, and then you can go back, or you can turn to Drake May. What can't happen, and it felt like Jerod Mayo was trying to say this, if you start Drake May in week 1 and he gets his brains beaten in for the next 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, you can't bench him and then come back to him and bench him and come back to him. That's not a recipe for success for a young quarterback. So this is intriguing to me. I thought it was a done deal in terms of Jacoby Brissett. You see the schedule here. It is brutal up top. Bengals, Seahawks, Jets, 49ers. Does Drake May survive that? That's the question. I would lean towards Jacoby Brissett. It feels like Jerod Mayo is not quite certain after what we saw from Drake May in the preseason, but I wouldn't overcomplicate it, because you don't want to be a situation where Drake gets sacked a ton and then you have to take him out in week 5 or 6.
Ryan, just to follow on that, because I know that there's a lot of Patriots fans with those same concerns. They don't want to put their franchise quarterback out behind a shaky offensive line until they can get all of that sorted too. So at what point of the season do the Patriots have to say, look, we need to get this guy in the game. He needs to get reps. We need to turn our seasons around here. So at what point do you think we see him start?
Drake May is one of the youngest players drafted, Haley, and in a perfect world, with the understanding that the Patriots aren't winning 10 games, and I think their win total right now is 4.5, so if they win 5 or 6 games, I wouldn't play him at all. Maybe you play him the last month of the season, the last few weeks of the regular season, once it's clear that they're out of the playoff chase, but I don't know if there's a rush to get him out there. I know some people will argue that the more reps you can take, the better, and I think in a perfect world that's the case, but we saw going back in the day to David Carr when he was drafted by the Texans, he was regularly sacked 70 times a year, and that's no way to start a career. So I would be fine sitting him for the year. We live in a day and age where that doesn't happen with first-round quarterbacks. So if you can get to Thanksgiving and then give him a chance to get his feet wet, I would like to see that happen. I imagine he sees the field much sooner than that, Haley.
I know our producer Boney is clapping his hands for that one as a Patriots fan with protecting his quarterback up there. So we'll see. The Patriots do open the season against the Bengals on CBS September 8th. Let's go over to San Francisco where, look, the cuts are done, the deals have been signed, the roster is finalized, and yet here we are still just about a week ahead of week 1, and we still haven't seen any movement for Brandon Aiyuk or even Trent Williams for that matter. At this point in the season here, Ryan, is it worth the headache to try and get something done here, particularly with Brandon Aiyuk? Or, I mean, what are our options at this point? Because we were talking over and over again about the trades and how long Williams is going to hold out here. Is this really worth it?
It's worth it because this is a playoff team and a Super Bowl team perhaps in San Francisco, and it feels like an unforced error. And we talk about that sometimes with really good organizations. You don't see the Chiefs having these sort of issues, or they find a way to mask these issues. And Brandon Aiyuk is one of the most curious cases I can recall of a player holding in or holding out, whatever you'd like to call it. Had trade offers on the table. He seems uncertain about where he wants to go, so he's just sort of hanging around. I think the more important issue, though, Haley, is Trent Williams. He's in his 30s. He's a left tackle. He doesn't play a skill position. I would argue he's the most important person on that football team, and that includes Brock Purdy and Christian McCaffrey. So they need him more than they need Brandon Aiyuk right now, and I'm not sure which player signs first. They have the cap space to get both done, so that also makes it curious. But if Brandon Aiyuk is not going to be willing to take a trade to the Steelers, I don't know what we're waiting for with that. He's not getting Justin Jefferson money. He's not getting CeeDee Lamb money. I think they have an idea of where they need to sign him. The bigger issue for me is getting Trent Williams out there in week 1, because we saw last year when he didn't play because of injury, Christian McCaffrey's yards per game suffered. So that's the primary concern for me. I wouldn't be surprised, however, if the Aiyuk deal gets done sooner. But again, what's taking so long for both, I have no idea.
When it comes to Brandon Aiyuk, are you feeling as though his best fit is still getting something done in San Francisco? Because, you know, as we talked about, there were a couple of trade options still available with the Steelers and the Browns. Is that best fit here? Or I'm just trying to think of all the scenarios at this point, because again, like, we're just about a week ahead of the season and people got to know where this guy is lining up. So is there a better fit for him somewhere else, or should he stay home?
Well, several weeks ago, Haley, there were reports that the Patriots, who were very interested in Aiyuk, were willing to give him $32-ish million a year. I don't know if the 49ers are willing to do that. So if you're not looking for the highest payday you can get, it makes sense to me to take whatever the 49ers are offering if it's competitive, because you have Brock Purdy, you have Christian McCaffrey, you have Trent Williams, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, and you have Kyle Shanahan putting you in a position to have success. You can go to Pittsburgh, but you don't know what that quarterback situation is going to be. Cleveland was on the table. You don't know what that quarterback situation is going to be. So, again, it's curious to me that this is taking so long to get done, if they're arguing over a few dollars or if it's something else. But it seems to me, if you want to put yourself in position to have the best chance at a Super Bowl, San Francisco is where you should stay. We'll find out together if that happens. The season is a week and a half away, a week away, and we still have no real resolution on either player.
Listen, we'll all just find out together, like you said. The Niners will host the Jets in week 1, who are ironically dealing with a holdout of their own with Hassan Reddick. We won't get into that at this moment. Instead, we're going to pivot and talk about the Bengals, who will face the Patriots in week 1, as we discussed, and they will do it hopefully with Jamar Chase on the field. You know, he's also one of those guys we haven't really talked a lot about in terms of his contract negotiations and what he deserves versus what he's going to get paid. It's interesting, though, Ryan, because he was not practicing today, though, even though head coach Zach Taylor said that he'd be a full participant all week. So are you smelling some trouble in Cincy now that some of the dollars are starting to fall for guys like CeeDee Lamb?
So great news a few days ago. Jamar Chase is returning to practice. Zach Taylor, the head coach, says he's going to practice. And then today, no practicing from Jamar. He showed up 10 minutes late to practice in street clothes. I don't know if that's a huge concern, and the Bengals have said they're trying to work through the negotiations. And the other thing to keep in mind, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Aiyuk, all in the same draft class. The subsequent draft class, the one that came after that, is the class that Jamar Chase is in. So he still has 2 years left in his deal. That said, the Bengals are trying to work through it. They understand that he wants to get paid, and he deserves to get paid, and he's probably going to get north of whatever Brandon Aiyuk gets and closer to CeeDee Lamb money, maybe Justin Jefferson money. But I think they're still working through the details of that. Joe Burrow has said it only takes a practice or two to get on the same page with Jamar, so he's not worried. They obviously played together at LSU, and they've had a ton of success in Cincinnati. So it sounds like they're going to try to get a deal done before the start of the season. But again, the clock's ticking, and I guess the real question becomes, who's first? Jamar, Brandon Aiyuk, Trent Williams? Because all three of those guys are incredibly important to their team's success. We're just sitting here in wait-and-see mode, Haley, to see how this plays out.
They're just giving us stuff to talk about as we count down to the NFL. They're just trying to make sure we've got some content here on CBS Sports HQ.
News out of the NFL, where the Steelers have named Russell Wilson their starting QB for Week 1. Russ beat out Justin Fields for the starting job and will be under center on September 8th when Pittsburgh takes on the Falcons in Atlanta. Now, Wilson spent the past 2 seasons in Denver, throwing 42 touchdowns to 19 INTs. Wilson was released by the Broncos in March, then signing with the Steelers on a 1-year deal later that month. So what does this all mean for your fantasy team, your fantasy drafts? A lot of drafts are going on this week. I'm literally in the thick of two of them as we speak. Jamie, let's start with Russ, because we were talking about this a little bit before this segment. There was a point last season where Russ was a serviceable fantasy quarterback. Him being named the starter week 1, give us your outlook for Russ as a fantasy quarterback to start this season.
Yeah, I think, just listening to Pete and B-Mac, especially Pete's perspective, that we may see him replaced at some point. And I think B-Mac's right why he would be replaced, whether it's an injury to Russell Wilson or more likely the Steelers are losing games, they need to make some sort of a switch. So when you're in a 1-quarterback fantasy league, you're not drafting any of these guys. But I'm in a super flex draft right now that's going on. Trevor Lawrence just went, by the way.
Okay.
And this type of format, super flex or 2-quarterback league, these guys are very popular and very prominent because they're going to be potentially a starter at some point during the season. Now, I think if you're shooting for upside, you're still taking Justin Fields over Russell Wilson, because if one guy hits, it's not going to be Russ. It's going to be Fields, because what he does with his legs. The safe factor, obviously, though, is to take Russell Wilson, because if they are winning games, if he does stay healthy, he'll be the starter the entirety of the season. I do think the biggest thing, though, about either of these quarterbacks is getting the weapons the ball, and that's what matters most.
Yes, let's get to that. George Pickens, it feels like he has a lot of upside as well. So what does this mean for him?
He's my favorite Steelers player to draft.
Okay.
There's a caveat, though.
Okay.
Hopefully no Brandon Aiyuk trade.
Yes.
Because if Brandon Aiyuk is traded there, that changes everything for the receiving core. But as long as they're currently constructed with George Pickens as the #1 guy. Last year he stepped up when Deontay Johnson was hurt. We know Johnson is gone. Last year he stepped up when Mason Rudolph was starting as opposed to Kenny Pickett. So now you have Russell Wilson coming in. And in our Fantasy Football magazine, we were asked bold predictions. One of my bold predictions is that Pickens could lead the NFL in touchdown receptions. Okay. Now we saw Russell Wilson. You mentioned last year he was good. Why was he good? Cortland Sutton, 10 touchdowns last year, was in the on near the top of the leaderboard. And Russ does have several seasons in Seattle where his #1 receiver has gotten 10+ touchdowns. One of those guys was Doug Baldwin, who led the NFL in touchdown receptions with 14. So if Pickens can get 10+ touchdowns, he's going to have a breakout third-year season and could be a great fantasy asset.
Yeah, and of course, still TBD on Brandon Aiyuk. It feels like we've been waiting so long to see what he ends up doing. Jamie, we certainly appreciate it. Good luck.